I'm James Harrowing, I'm the editor and co-founder of Tortoise, and this is Caitlin Moran. This is a slight handbrake turn because we had a day here today discussing cyber threats.
Oh, I'm good on that.
Yeah.
I know loads.
I just wonder whether or not you could just sort of... No, so the nice thing is that that's really quite worrying.
It doesn't sound good.
And this is really great.
And you don't need a password for that.
This is totally great. So we are going to, I hope, make life really easy for me and for Caitlin, which is that you are going to do a lot of the talking. You're going to say what you think about all of this. I think it's supposed to be a time where we all bring our points of view, our thoughts, our stories. So please don't feel as though you're just going to hear Caitlin. We want to hear from you as well in the course of this next hour. And that goes, by the way, for all of you too who are joining us online. Please do weigh in. If you wave your digital hand or if you signal in the chat, I'll make sure to bring everyone in.
James, I love that you're presenting that as an opportunity to the audience rather than the fact that you've only written one question down on a piece of paper.
No, actually, by the way, here's the plan. So we're just going to go into this. I hope it feels like it's probably worked out. What I've written here is that we want to talk about sneezes.
Yeah.
There's quite an issue about men and women on sneezes, I think, in the book.
Yes, a heated topic.
Vulvas, vaginas, and words.
Yes.
And also just the, inequality of words. We're going to get into that in that.
So you've just written sneezing and fannies on there.
I wrote sneezing, fannies, and also what I love you means during sex. I really want to get into that. So we're going to start with the grotesque inequality around language.
Yes.
Because it's obviously a problem.
Yeah.
We've got the words.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, women have only very recently, in terms of history, been able to be educated and be able to have words and use words. And we've been policed where we use them when we haven't had the sort of places that we can, with the opportunities to spread. Basically, we just need to invent more words for female things. I just realised that every day there are things that happen to me or experiences that I have or thoughts that I have that there isn't a vocabulary for because they are female things. And the most visceral example that I can give of that is a phenomenon that I noted often afflicts women who have been blessed with children when they have a bath and they enjoy their bath and then they get out of the bath and they dry themselves and they dress. And then about 4 minutes later, there's a kind of thimph and some bath water comes out of your fanuna. And I know that many women have this experience. You may be trying to be coy about it today, but I've done my research. I know it's between 30 and 40% of women, and but there's no word to describe that, and I've never seen it discussed anywhere. Like we don't even realise how many of the experiences we have are not discussed or given a name anywhere. So I tried to name this.
Vaginal bubble bath.
Yes, the vaginal bubble bath. What did we have? We had the Punani tsunami. We had what did we have? Oh, the vagina monologue flume was my favourite one. But we've crowdsourced this when we've done events, kind of like women give. And again, it's still up for grabs. That phenomenon, I would like it to be known as Moran front bottom syndrome, because that would be my one stab at immortality. But if anyone has a better term for it, do let me know. Like if this is all open source stuff, we can maybe this is tonight's the night we can crack bathwater coming out of your fanuna.
So I want to ask that the book starts with this harrowing visit from your older self.
Yes. And
the truth is, though, when you read then the rest of the book, you're not your older self at all. It's exactly the same.
Yes, of course, yes.
So is it true? Do you actually think you're any different from the person who wrote How to Be a Woman?
Yes, in many ways. I thought I knew. I mean, I think this is a recurrent thing that everyone has throughout their lives. Kind of every 10 years you think, well, that's me done. I'm me now. The job is finished and I know everything. And then obviously 10 years later you look back at that self and go, who was that idiot and why was she in charge of my life? So at the age of, I wrote How to Be a Woman when I was 32 and I'd gone through adolescence. I had got married, I had had children, I had had abortions and miscarriages. I'd gone through eating disorders, I'd bought a house. I'd finally worked out what the best tools were for getting blackheads out of your ears. I thought I had a pretty perfect life and I knew everything. And I presumed that all the difficult stuff had been done because my children were sort of coming up towards the teenage years. And on a purely practical level, I was like, well, I won't have to wipe their bottoms anymore. And they can catch the bus themselves. So presumably the next bit of my life is going to be the easy bit. I'll have all this free time. Life will become elegant and relaxed. I'll probably just wear a linen suit and go for long brunches with girlfriends, maybe in Cannes. And presumably that's what middle age is. And obviously anyone who is middle age will know it's not like that at all. It's the absolute opposite of that, because The luxury you have when you're younger is that all your problems are your problems. It's you sorting out who you are and what you love and who you want to be. In middle age, all your problems are other people's problems. If you're a reasonably sorted middle-aged woman, you become like an emergency call center for everyone in your lives. You have got adolescent children, you've got aging parents, you've got friends who are divorcing, you've got people who are going through crises, you've probably stupidly bought yourself a dog. And so you're suddenly responsible for all these things, and you are just in the center of all of this, holding the threads of society together with your bare hands for no pay at all. Because the main thing about being middle-aged is the majority of stuff that you're doing, you're not being paid for. You have to fit it in around your actual job and stuff that you like. The amount of stuff that you do that you actually like is about this much. The amount of stuff that you're doing to get paid is this much. And the amount of unpaid shit that you're doing for people who are not grateful in any way at all is like this. That's the graph there. I've done a pie chart with my hands.
And do you think, and Caitlin, because when you wrote How to Be a Woman, the thing about, I mean, I know it's very, very funny, but it was also an argument with a kind of, not even a lazy sexism, that kind of a sort of the right thing to say. It was with a sort of everyday, easy, this is the way things work sexism.
Yeah.
And it was an argument. And have you got more radicalized by it, or are you, how's that changed?
Well, the reason I wanted to write How to Be a Woman, so I started writing it in 2010, and I had a very visceral sense that we just weren't using the word feminism anymore, that feminism was in its sort of like in its most fallow period. It was only being discussed in very dry academic textbooks and feminist forums. There was no kind of populist feminism at all. And looking back now as well, I think since the recent Britney Spears documentary came out, I've also sort of retrospectively realised that sort of those 10 years, sort of like the late 90s into the noughties, was one of the most destructive eras for women. If you go back and read like the tabloid press now, the way that women are spoken about, the kind of language that's used, the Daily Mail sidebar of shame, like kind of, you know, a woman having a fat toe. You know, there would be a circle around her toe poking out of a sandal, like kind of women were constantly being criticised for everything they did. And the language around them was incredibly toxic. Even in female-only publications, the tone in women's magazines was very much like, sort your minge out and buy a handbag. It was all very kind of, you know, these are the solutions to your life. So I had a very strong sense that I wanted to do two things. I wanted to speak to women in a friendly way. I wanted to put my arm around them and go, there is a bag of shit out there that no one is talking about. Let's talk about this together. And I wanted to re-explain why we needed to, why feminism was so amazing. It just felt like it was a thing that had got covered in sand and dust because we'd had, the Spice Girls came along and went, there's girl power. And we just started talking about girl power instead of feminism. And girl power, as far as I could work out, just basically meant being friends with your friends and buying Spice Girls records. Whereas feminism has this brilliant centuries-long tradition of legislation and talk and discussion and sort of creating new lexicons of words and understanding about gender. And I very much felt that that was more useful than singing along to Wannabe, much as I like it. So yes, I was just like, wow, I want to just explain to normal people why feminism is amazing, why it's incredible. And when I started writing it, I thought that I would have to go and do all the research about feminism. I would have to read all the books and find out what it was. And then I just didn't have time. So I just did common sense. But in the writing of it and just trying to use common sense to solve these problems about, you know, that women faced every day, I realized that that is what feminism is. It's an entirely crowdsourced amateur game that women all over the world have contributed to. It's a patchwork quilt. Every single thing that is a feminist game that we've got, whether, you know, it's a phrase like the Bechdel test, you know, or marching for rights and all of these things, there's been some normal women somewhere who've gone, this is a problem that I can see a solution to. I'm going to name it, I'm going to talk to my friends about it, and I'm going to solve it.
And what's changed since 2010?
Well, luckily, feminism became a thing again. You know, Dior sent sort of like models down the catwalk with the word feminism behind them. Beyonce did a single quoting Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's essay on feminism. Feminism, you can buy feminist Topshops t-shirts in Topshop, or you could until Topshop died. It became a thing, and that was incredibly exciting. But the thing that I noticed in those 10 years is that the feminism that we concentrated on was feminism for young women, about being a messy, hot mess, fleabaggy kind of like sex and boyfriends and shagging and politics and kind of the young people mess. And those feminists are now 10 years older, and our problems now aren't generally about working out who we are and shagging around and stuff. It's the big, supposedly boring stuff. What happens in the house? Who's taking care of people? How will we get past this? Who will love? What does love mean? Who are the carers? And I wanted to write about that in a way that made it what it is, which is just an absolute white knuckle seat of your pants ride through those 20 years, because these are the biggest issues that there are. You're stopping people from dying. You're teaching people what love is. You are taking care of your community. You are shaping people and keeping them going. And like, that's proper superhero shit. But we think that what middle-aged women are doing is just in their houses moaning about who's doing the washing, which we are also doing a lot. But we are actually secret superheroes. You know, that the definition, you know, when you look at the superhero movies, it's about someone, mothers are superheroes, this is why. The superhero movie archetype is that a young man is infected by some mysterious substance, such as a meteoroid from space that is radioactive, or they're bitten by a spider. Their body becomes suddenly full of these incredible powers. They are transformed, and then they have to keep saving humanity, but with no credit at all. They secretly are saving humanity with no credit at all. That's mums. We are infected with a mysterious substance, sperm. Our bodies suddenly grow all these incredible powers, like milk and placentas and then babies, and then we save them every fucking day for no credit at all. That's why it's astonishing to me that most superheroes are about teenage boys rather than about middle-aged women with one breast larger than the other. That's the superhero movie I want to see.
And that you've written.
And I have written.
I want to, please do weigh in if you want to, and likewise online, I don't want to be, but I do want to ask, because the thing I thought was different about this book was there's also a confidence you've got now about writing about love.
Yes. Well, that is, I mean, I think it's one of the hardest things. People say that sex is the hardest thing to write about, but I just make it funny. So like, kind of, I find sort of writing sort of pornography and sex scenes in the fiction that I've written very easy. But love is the hardest thing because it's really hard not to become trite. Or to become cliched, and to talk about it as not just all the mystical stuff that kind of like transforms you and inspires you, but just what love practically means. Like, love is a verb, love is a doing word, and the amount of times in my life that I have been told that someone loves me, or I've been told, like, you know, well, your dad loves you. It's like, yeah, I mean, he's just saying that. What's he doing? Love is a doing word, and the describing of the doing of love is something that is endlessly interesting.
And do you find that frightening or intimidating writing about it, because it's weirdly it's much more exposing than writing about sex?
I found a freedom in realizing, and it took me a long time to realize this, given that I'd been writing since I was 13, that the most powerful you are as a writer is when you see something that no one's written about. Like, kind of, you would think going into uncharted territory is the scary bit, but it's not, because that's what's needed. And the thing that I love most is being useful. If you ever have a crisis of confidence as a writer, if you know you're doing something that is useful, then that gives you, you've given yourself a mandate to do it. It's like, well, this isn't indulgent. This is a useful thing to do. I will describe a thing that's never been done before. If there's something taboo, if there's something secret, if there's something shameful, that's where I want to be. So
one of the things I've done quite well here, because I've done about 15 minutes without talking about me or men.
Yes.
They're quite good.
Is it man time now?
Yeah, let's go.
Can we ring the man bell? Ting, 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 ting.
I think there are a lot of guys here who thought, can we get to the real story here? Let's get to the guy stuff. Because one of the things that is really, I don't know whether you've been to a thinking with Pete Perfides.
He's my husband. I married him. That's my husband.
Yes, that is it. And the way you talk about him actually makes me cry. It's just so lovely. And yet at the same time, I wonder to myself, if you're Pete, do you think, no, Caitlin, that's fine. We can love each other to pieces. Can you just not talk about it and go and do that? What did he feel?
Well, the great thing is that he's a writer as well, and he's just written a memoir about his childhood. So we're
everything's
both
material.
just like, yeah. And also, so much of the art of it is, I mean, it seems that I am very revealing and candid, but actually, and oversharing. But there's actually only very small amounts about me specifically or my family. The structure is always, there's a vignette at the start of something that's happened, which I actually try and get out of as quickly as possible to make a bigger point. And the deal is, I'm like, I'll give you a delicious piece of gossip or a secret or something that's like interesting to read in order to like entice you into where we're going to talk about this bigger stuff. Because I think that's fair. Because I think if you're just going to turn up and talk about how you see the world and how you would rule it, that's not fair on the reader. You should just have as much fun in there as possible before you start going, and this is what I would do if I was Prime Minister.
So let's do our level best of stripping the fun out.
Yes.
So what I think also there are these moments in the book where you write about things. There's one moment really early on where you've obviously stayed up quite late. You've decided to put on Twitter a photograph of your feet.
Foot. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
With Jacob's crackers between the toes.
Jacob's green crackers, yes.
And
It's the kind of thing you do at 1 o'clock in the morning when you're with your siblings, yeah.
That's right. And rather than then getting trolled by people on Twitter about the terrible abuse of great crackers,
Yes.
you get then you get trolled, right? And you kind of dance past it. But I wonder how much you, and this is within the kind of context of the sort of what's the feminist kind of battle now. When you think about that stuff, and we talk about it, and we always talk about it quite earnestly.
Yes.
How do you handle it? Because you get yourself in the middle of these things now and again.
Any woman who is online will get huge amounts of abuse and very personal abuse. And talking about it online is exactly the wrong place to do it, because I think it is an industry that loves people. You know, the click rate is 3 times higher if someone's having an argument, or if there's, you know, the fox hunt this week is this is the person we're cancelling, this is the person we're chasing. And then you double down on that if you then go on Twitter and go, I'm now having a nervous breakdown, or I'm really sad, or I'm really angry, or this is why these people are wrong, because then the cycle starts again. So it's just best when that starts to just like step away and not say anything at all. But every woman I know in the public eye who's on social media gets it. And they would all tell you without exception that it is utterly dementing, and it takes you years to get over it. I'm now luckily in the phase where it doesn't make me ill anymore, but it definitely used to make me ill. I'm deeply paranoid, deeply anxious, deeply unhappy, because knowing people hate you is the worst thing for a human being. And the thing about being public, you know, John Ronson's book is very good on this. The thing about being publicly shamed is the deepest emotion that any human being can have. And if once you've been shamed on social media, Monica Lewinsky talks about this. She's like, shame is like being covered in tar. You can't get it off, and if anybody reaches out to help you, they get covered in the tar as well. So now when I see anyone that I know, even if they're people I don't know, if I see someone who's being cancelled that week, or, you know, whatever it is, who's being trolled on social media, I won't do anything in public. I will immediately DM them and give them my emergency package of how you deal with this stuff, which is don't say anything, come off social media for a week, shut down your mentions, and then come out for a drink with me, and I will hug you and tell you it's all okay.
You once sent me, by the way, a really lovely text message in the middle of what was a really ugly time, which was, hope you're okay. I remember it still, hope you're okay. You are in the middle of a shitstorm of actual shit. And I thought, great. And I really felt, and as you can see, still feel great about that. The reason I want to ask about the trolling thing was that actually, before you did How to Be a Woman, and we were working together at the time, and I remember feeling sort of embarrassed. We started having this conversation about that kind of a sort of forgotten feminism, right? And it was not about a kind of intellectual feminism or radical feminism. It was about a feminism that was confronting the stuff that was effectively on the high street. I remember you'd written a column about strip clubs. Was it in Muswell Hill? It was somewhere like unlikely. It was like, and this is like Crouch End. It's like in the middle of our lives. And this trolling is the same thing, right? Is an assault on people in the middle of our lives. And I wonder where you find yourself now within that argument amongst feminists. We had Julie Bindel come in and sit the other day, and for her, it's all about violence against women. And how do you sort of try to make sense of that? Because, you know, there are lots of, there are different arguments within the argument.
Yes, well, I think we tend to use, it's important to know what the different categories are. So trolling is just simply pure out abuse, and will usually bring a gang with it. That's very separate from call-out culture, which I'm a centrist in everything. So whenever we bring up any subject, I'll be like, I'm right in the center, I see both sides. So the good thing about call-out culture is it's younger people going, the world is changing, these are the new words, these are the new standards, this is how we should treat people, this is our understanding of what humanity is, this is how we need to change. And often it's younger people saying this to older people who are more established in their jobs. They're the ones with the paid columns, they're the ones with big jobs in media, and it's young people who don't have that money and resource and platform going, we will use social media to tell you that we're doing things differently. We are basically going to educate you very brutally and in public, but that's what we're going to do. I think a huge amount of that is useful. And it's accelerated so many conversations, like sort of like the way that campaigns and language has changed now is faster than it ever has been in my lifetime. There's a lot of useful stuff in that. As long as it's done politely, you know, kind of like, you know, and cordially, that's a really good exchange between the generations. Where it goes wrong is when it is disproportionate and it makes people scared. The thing I hear most from young people is that they are scared, not only to say something that they believe online, but to even ask questions. Because if you asked a question, you would get people going, you shouldn't even be having to ask that question. Go and educate yourself. You should learn about these things. And if you have the main arena of public discourse that influences, the sort of media and society in the way that we use language now, where people are scared, there isn't a belief that there is not good-natured, good faith arguments. You're not allowed to ask questions. You're not allowed to be playful.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to be silly. I get very scared of any political movement or any cultural movement where you can't make jokes and be silly. Like that's where you find the quickest and most useful truths.
Yeah.
And if you're always policing yourself and you can't make a joke, then we stall and people can't speak and people are scared to speak. So the problem with call-out culture is that it's disproportionate punishment for ignorance or being older or not being au fait with the way that younger people are thinking. But I do see both sides. I do think a lot of call-out culture is useful. It's simply the right to reply to people who are, more established and need to catch up. But it's way in disproportion to what's happened, to what usually happens. Because if you're one person calling someone out, you don't know that 2 million other people are calling that person out, and that within that 2 million people, 500,000 of them are bots that are saying, "I'm going to come and kill your children. I know where you live."
Someone described to me the other day cancel culture. I think it was Ash Sarkar actually said cancel culture is the best and quickest way to fill the 10 to 9 slot on the Today programme.
Yes. Oh, no, absolutely. No, absolutely.
This is an argument that we want to have when we don't quite know what other argument we want to have.
Although I do love the fact that Today programmes still talk about the internet like it's just kind of new thing, that it's like the magic faraway trees in internet land this week, but we hope it moves on. Just kind of like there have been tweets and likes aplenty this week on the internet. Come on, it's been there for a while.
I want to bring my colleague Liz Mosley, if she's there, just because there's a point that Liz... Where is Liz? Hang on. That's
just
unbelievable.
You're on chat, James. Don't worry about it.
Can I just ask you a question? So you're actually on the internet and you're here in person?
I'm literally on the internet, James. I know.
You are now being Nick Robinson. She's on the internet and in a room at the same time. Is it possible?
It's unbelievable. Well, that's what we're talking about here, Caitlin. This is the kind of thing we're doing here. We're pushing back the boundaries of journalism.
Yeah. Also, listen,
when we talk about women multitasking, James, we're literally looking at it.
Well, it does look like you're DJing from here. It looks like you've stood up at the back and you're taking requests.
Okay, so hang on a second. So you don't even need... I don't need to read out what you said because you're here.
What did I say? I've said so many things.
You said the thing that made you cry about Caitlin's book was this thing about the trauma of getting older and being kinder, a kind of feminism.
Yeah, Caitlin, I cried 3 times. I've read it all today, the whole book. And most of today I was in the Tortoise Cybersecurity Summit. So it was awkward when I was crying and laughing at the same time. And the part towards the end, you talk about the thing about when you get old. I'm old too. And I do feel, people who know me may know that this is wishful thinking, but I am nicer now. I am definitely nicer now. I'm sadder, I'm kinder, and because when you meet people that they have had more life, which means that they've had more trauma.
Yes.
And everyone's upset.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. Yeah. And I think about me when I was in my 20s. And I was a massive pain in the arse because I was so hard. I was so sure about everything, and sort of swinging around Soho, drinking heavily, and mouthing off. Yeah, it was brilliant. I loved it. But I definitely am nicer now, and I think that, read the book because it's very moving, and it's moving about how we live in our minds as women, the age that we are. We look crapper now, I'm a bit fatter, but I feel like I would like me more if I met me now than then.
Well, that's the main thing. It is that thing of realising that you are just more careless. You're stupider. You've hopefully and statistically probably not encountered that much pain in your teens and 20s and 30s. By the time you get to 40, you've seen people die, you've seen people's minds dissolve, you've had the long conversations where people tell you their backstories, and you start realizing that the safest thing to do when you're talking to anybody, if it's just someone pushing in front of you in a queue or someone that you're going to spend a day with at a wedding, that they are probably dealing with something horrible that they're not going to tell you about. I think most people are walking around feeling sore and unhappy and carrying something that you do not know about. So that's the biggest sort of difference that, I very much believed in, the joke was the most important thing in my teens and 20s. And that was a very 90s culture thing as well. So long as you're making a funny joke, then that's sort of the only thing you need to worry about. Now there are so many jokes that not only that I wouldn't make, but that I don't even think of because they are careless of people's hearts. There's a broadness or a an over-muscularity to the language which could hurt someone, and I'm much more careful in the words that I pick and the jokes that I make, because I think most people, and particularly after the last 2 years, I mean, I wrote most of this book before the pandemic, but like, you know, my understanding now as a 46-year-old woman is that most people are having a terrible time. And I don't know whether I'm particularly unfortunate in my social circle, but I just, whenever, you know, especially now I've written a book about secret sadnesses and dealing with stuff, like kind of whenever I go out and I sit down with people, they will start telling me about what's going on in their lives. And it's like, you know, I write about my daughter's eating disorder in there, and the statistics came out today that 58% of 17 to 19-year-old girls are now suffering from eating disorders. Like, that's huge. Nearly 60% of all 16 to 19-year-olds, you know, kind of thing. That's something that's just come up out of nowhere in the last 20 years. So there is so much pain around at the moment, and you know, in an eating disorder, it physically manifests. But like, you've got to think about the girls who feel as upset and sad as the girls with visible eating disorders, who aren't visibly showing it yet. They haven't developed an eating disorder. They're just that unhappy and depressed. So yeah, I just always presume that everybody's had a really, really bad day. And I think that's the safest way to go about life.
I'm going to, one in the back, and I'm going to come to you in a moment. Phoebe, yeah.
Hi, Caitlin. So I'm actually going to say
Just
something
introduce
positive.
yourself, so everyone, because not everyone knows everyone.
I'm Phoebe. I write The Sense Maker.
Hi,
So we wrote about the IUD stuff. If you didn't know about
Yes.
it, it's very good. Lots of people tweeted about it. Lucy Cohen, you did, Duncan Manchetti, like everyone's talking about it. It was kind of great because it was the first time I've ever seen a lot of women say, this is quite bad.
Yes.
And then people have turned around and said, yeah, it is. Okay, let's do something about it within like a week.
Yes.
How do we get that again?
Well, what, with that issue or another one?
Well, I think especially talking about the online stuff, right? Like I see the negatives, I see the problems with Twitter, but all I saw was like a lot of women turning around and saying, like, I shared my experience.
Yes.
Thank you so much, because it's really helped me out. But how do we like rally people in such like a good way? Is it that just that issue specifically was just an easy fix, or?
Yeah, God, there's a story I wish I could tell about the IUD thing, because so I wrote a column that I had a very painful IUD insertion. I've had IUDs for the last 30 years, and I went in to get my old one taken out and a new one put in, and the nurse there went, the doctor went, we've got a trainee here, and it will be the first time she's ever fitted an IUD. Can she practice on you? And I just thought, well, obviously I don't like the idea of that, but I'm an elder of the tribe, I'm silverback, rather me than some young Jejune girl with a, you know, perfect cervix. Mine's been around the block a bit, that's fine, let's use that as the testing ground. And 45 minutes later, some of the choice sentences were, I can't find it, have I got to put it round a corner, she's fainting, flip the table, and then at the very end of it, I fainted 3 times during it, and at the very end they gave me a Lucasade to make it better. It was like, no, I did not need Lucasade, I need a trained professional, a Valium, a local anaesthetic, and for this to never happen to me again. So I wrote about it, and then Naga Minchati picked up on it on her radio show, and then, I can't tell you all of this story, but then I got a phone call from Matt Hancock. Oh, I wish I could tell you the full story, but needless to say, when 3 days later his affair was uncovered, I was not surprised, given the tone of the conversation we'd had about women's vaginas. He's very cheerful about them. Let's put it that way. He promised to help, and let's hope that campaign continues. Oh God, if you want to know the full story later, come and ask me. But it was amazing.
Does anyone just come and ask Caitlin now? The full story now.
No, I can't. No, because you know how it is. It'll get.
Oh yes, I see.
Yeah, we're on the internet. Yeah, when it's truly life.
Liz is there. She's on it. Yeah, she's on the internet.
Turn off the internet for 30 seconds. I'll tell you the story. No. But I think in those cases there was such a simple fix to it. Just women need to be informed that it's often very painful and to be offered pain relief. But the thing that you see that happens time and time again that works really well in feminist campaigns is that someone needs to start a conversation, then everybody shares their experiences, and tell their stories. Then you name that as a phenomenon, and then you come up with solutions. And that overwhelming testimony of women is the same thing that we saw when Sarah Everard first went missing as well. Women starting to talk about how they were scared, and that started that conversation that's still going on now, and ways that we can change legislation in this country. Which my views on that are, I don't know if anybody's read Laura Bates's book, Men Who Hate Women, but in that, which is an incredible book, it must have been astonishingly painful to research, because she goes to the worst places in the internet that are populated by far more men than you would think. These are like forums that have 400 or 500,000 men on them saying the most awful things and making terrible plans. And she suggests that what we should do is we should start talking about misogynistic crime in the same way that we do about terrorism. And that's how it should be written about, and that's how it should be discussed, and that's how it should be prosecuted. Because more women are killed by men in misogynistic attacks than are killed in terrorist attacks, than any people are killed in terrorist attacks. It is constant, it is everywhere, it is a fear, and until we start using that kind of language, it being, you know, a war that we have in society that needs to be talked about in the most serious language and dealt with in the most serious way, and education starting as soon as there's the first sign. And again, you know, when we look at terrorism, almost always when there is an actual terrorist attack, that man has been known as a domestic abuser. You know, he has raped before, he has been violent. Like, women are always the canary in the mines. Like, kind of like when women are hurt, that man will usually escalate his behavior. So as soon as a man is, you know, and we know who the creepy guys are, right? Like, kind of, you know, I could literally name you the people that I think will be in the headlines in 5 years' time. We all know people who you're like, yeah, if I turn on the news tomorrow and I hear they've gone Tonto with a gun, I would not be surprised. So we know who they are, and we need to have a way of being able to talk about that and inform people.
Can I ask you, Alex and George, will you bring Sarah Wootton in, because she actually wanted to make a comment on the Sarah Everard case and just trying to understand. But when you think about this and the fact that there is such a conversation like this, but there's also such a gap between then what seems to happen in lawmaking, in government. You know, joking aside about Matt Hancock, there's a really strange thing, which is this, all of these things would seem to have a kind of huge natural constituency. Mandy Reid wrote a piece for us of the Women's Equality Party making exactly this case after Sarah Everard's murder, making exactly, and politically nothing happens. So why?
Well, I'm going to reveal myself to be quite left-wing and working class now, but that probably won't be a surprise to anyone. But one of the things that I observe about, generally, about public school boys, conservative politicians, is that they don't actually want to rule. They don't actually want to do stuff. Like, they outsource it. They outsource their children to nannies. They outsource their garden to gardeners. Like, kind of, they outsource their physical health to personal trainers who come around and tell them to run around the block. Like, you don't actually do anything. Like, kind of, it's all outsourced. That's the culture that I observe coming from where I come from and moving in these kind of circles, that you don't actually want to do things. Like, kind of, it's, you know, everything is outsourced, including being in government. Like, kind of, you don't actually want to do anything. And that sounds like chippy Wolverhampton council estate stuff, but it's also very notable. Like, kind of like, just stuff doesn't happen. And I find it absolutely baffling. Like, in the same way that to have that power and to not use it.
And the not doing of things.
In the same way that when I look at Jeff Bezos, like, you know, he wakes up every day and he could change the world. He's literally magic. When you're that wealthy, every day, anything you see on the news, you could fix by the end of the day. He could literally buy the Amazon. It would be great branding because he owns Amazon. Like, he could probably do it as a tax write-off. Like, you know, he could literally buy the whole thing. Like,
great branding for the forest.
Yeah, literally everyone's a winner in this situation. Like, there's nothing that you can solve, and like, kind of, and to not do that, for every day not doing that, every day not making that phone call, every day not making incredible things happen, I find astonishing. And then this gets a bit tinfoil hat kind of conspiracy theory, but I read about a parasite that they have recently identified. It was in the New Scientist, so it must be true. That they have found that the majority of entrepreneurs and businessmen they have found have been infected by this parasite at some point. It's a gut parasite, and it just changes something in the chemistry of the brain, and it makes you more adventurous, more risk-taking. Like, kind of, you know, you will be making risks in your business. This is why these people are entrepreneurs and start up successful businesses. But it's because they've slightly changed their brain chemistry to not feel risk and to not be worried about hurting people, and that makes you a great businessman. And you start wondering, like, will it be in the future that when we look at these super wealthy people, these people in massive monopolies and running huge businesses, are they just slightly physically different to us? Because it's a really weird thing to want to collect money and sit on it like a dragon.
Yeah.
Like, that's a weird thing. Like, you're not doing anything with it. You're just sitting on a ball.
They're not doing a thing. Write that book. People who don't do things.
Yeah.
Amazing thing. But Caitlin, I do want to see if we can get Sarah. Is it George? Did you manage to get Sarah? Just because she also wanted to raise. Sarah, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you fine. Yes. Sorry, you've written a message in the chat about Sarah Everard.
Yeah, so hi Caitlin, lovely to talk to you. I have a 15-year-old daughter, and Edie, and how do I talk to her about these sorts of crimes without frightening her? Because I'm frightened for her. at the moment,
Yeah.
and I want to know your reaction to that crime.
Well, well, I mean, I'm having to do exactly the same thing now, as is every mother that I know. It's difficult. You don't need to make her frightened because she's already frightened. She'll have seen it. Like, we sort of presume that we have to talk to our children about, sexual crimes and violence or whatever. They know about it. They're scared about it. So let her talk to you about, your job as a parent is to let her talk about how scared she is. So you go, have you heard about this thing on the news? How do you feel about it? Tell me about it. What are your friends saying? Often with teenagers, they won't tell you directly how they feel, but if you go, how do your friends feel about this? What are they saying? That will allow you access to how they actually think and feel. Then you have to go through the statistics with them and go, it is still, although obviously we know 2 women a week get killed in domestic incidents alone, still statistically it is very unlikely to happen to you. So you've got to put the perspective in there of facts, and then do something practical. Like I signed up my girls the week that Sarah Everard disappeared to go and get Krav Maga self-defense classes, which they're only just starting now because of the lockdown, and they had a huge queue because so many other people were doing it. So, give your girls the tools to feel a bit more physically confident on the street. Don't scare them because they already are scared. You're there to help them deal with their fear and talk about it, and then do the only practical things that you can. But there's there is also a class element to this, because it's so much easier to keep your children safe if you have money.
You're wealthy.
Because you can just give them an Uber account. And I know the risks that I had to take when, I was a teenager, because I had no money. I would have to walk home. And then my idea was that I would just walk down streets and I could jump out in front of a car if someone tried to kidnap me. Those are the things you're thinking when you're 16. So yeah, I mean, I suspect in a matriarchy with the proper feminist government, we would talk about, extending public transport so that girls would be safe of all classes, so they could always get home safely. We would have systems where there would be escorts. You would have crocodiles and kind of proper systems where we'd always make sure that our girls were safe, because those are not difficult systems to install compared to the stuff that we do in wars or the stuff that we can do economically.
So will you just introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Hannah. I have my own business, so I've obviously got that parasite. But I find as I get older, definitely I become far more socialist than I ever was, but kinder.
Yes.
But I find it hard to balance then between. It's like as a woman, you're not allowed to be cross. You're not allowed to be upset because then you're hysterical. And how do you manage to put your needs forward without losing the kindness? Because I do find I've got 23 kids that work for me and they can really take the piss.
It's difficult.
Bring it.
Yeah, I mean, in the future, in a perfect utopia, when we've had all these discussions, women will be allowed to be angry and women will be allowed to be sad. In the same way that women would be allowed to be angry and sad on the internet. But the same advice that I give to women on the internet is the advice I give them in real life. You will probably still get bitten on the arse if you are sad and angry with people, or in person on the internet, because people just can't handle it and they will be angry back at you. So in the future we'll be allowed to do that in the same way that men are. But for now, what you have to do is take that anger and sadness and use it as an energy. You have to convert it into something else. The world isn't ready for pure undiluted female anger and sadness. It has to be at the moment sort of converted or translated into something else. Otherwise you will be having your emotions and also having to educate people as to why you're having emotions, and you don't have time for that. You literally don't have time to explain to people why you're sad or why you're angry. So you have to turn it into an energy and just do I find that 90% of the time, whether it's work or with my children or with a lot of friends who are going through bad times, the best thing to do as a middle-aged woman is to pretend to be a really lovely cow. Just a lovely plodding dairy cow called Daisy. That just sort of goes, moo, that sounds like it's tough. That's 90% of all that you can say to people. And then you go away and make your plans. But face to face, the consequences, I'm sure you've had it. Every time I think, you know what, I'm going to treat myself to some delicious anger. I'm going to tell this person to fuck off. And then they become so upset and angry at you that suddenly it's a whole day issue. And then you're having to email everybody the day after.
And it's the girls that are the worst.
Oh God, yeah. Oh yeah, no, of course. No, I mean.
What do you mean, Hannah?
I mean that they're the ones that can then turn it back around at you like you're the hysterical middle-aged woman.
Yeah. Or they'll start crying and then you have to deal with their upset and they're just going to be really triggered right now. This is really difficult for me. Yeah, no. It's really funny when I started off sort of talking about feminism and I talk about sort of difficult things in the workplace. I would always presume that the problems that the women who came to the things would have were with men. So it was all talking about, how to deal with mansplaining, how to deal with ideas being stolen, how to deal with not being listened to. But afterwards, the women would come up and go, actually, a lot of the problem I'm having is with my female boss or my female colleagues. They were like, how do you deal with women? Feminism is very good about talking about how to deal with men, but it's very difficult. It hasn't yet really fully turned its eye of Sauron onto how do women deal with difficult women, because that's seen as unsisterly. But we have to remember, feminism isn't Buddhism, and it's not ecstasy. You don't have to love everybody. Sometimes people are just bitches, and you are allowed to say that as a feminist.
But Caitlin, I'm going to come to Lisa in a moment, but there were two things. Online, Sudi had a question about this same thing, about the way you get portrayed when you're angry. I don't know whether Sudi's there. Sudi, can you hear us? Can you weigh in?
Yeah.
Yes, you are. Oh, you are. I can see you. Hello there.
Hi. Yeah, I'm irresistible at the moment, but
Lovely.
yeah, no, it's really lovely, and I haven't lost my temper with anyone for quite a few days. And my dad was just like, "Oh, careful! Don't even say that, because if we start talking about it, you will lose it." But I find it very difficult because I'm quite outspoken, and a lot of things, you know, I find a lot of things piss me off. But if I get angry about things, whether it's something with a stranger, you know, who's cut me up on my bike, or it's with, you know, the ridiculous girlfriend of my son, she says quietly.
Wow, you're really dishing the dirt tonight. The tea is being spilled. Let's go.
Very, very deep problem. But I find that if I show anger, I'm portrayed as crazy, and it's not. It's just I want to make my point. No, and I just don't know why this happens over and over again. It happens in work situations, it happens in personal situations. I mean, I know I can be quite scary, but if men get angry, it's seen as being assertive. And I just think this has got to change.
I have to make it clear, I absolutely believe in female anger, because of course women get angry. Like kind of, there's a brilliant Egyptian feminist called Mona El-Torni, who I follow on Twitter, who's just written a really brilliant essay about how incredible it would be if we did manage to raise a generation of girls that could express their anger. They would be these amazing volcanoes that would explode, and people would fear them, and we would start making progress. That's obviously what we need to happen in the future, but I'm a very practical feminist, like kind of like you've got to do two things. You've got to be working towards making the future perfect, but dealing with what you have now. And I just observe that when women get angry, almost anywhere, it ends up being more of a ball ache for you. And I'm very practical. I don't have the time to be angry at someone and then either have them call me insane or burst into tears. So I'm just like, okay, I will now take all of my anger and crash it down into my stomach, and I will get a stomach ulcer, but it will at least make this day end sooner. But you know, I'm very, very, that's the problem with being a feminist is you're having to do two things at once. You're having to try and create a better and perfect future whilst dealing with the bullshit that there is now, and that's the balancing act every day.
Can we just run a very quick experiment on the way men and women see men and women's anger, just out of interest? How many women think it's easier to be angry if you're a man? And how many men think it's easier to be angry if you're a man? Well, let's put it this way. How many men think it's not easier to be angry if you're a man? But there's the same, there are not a different set of, there are issues about being angry if you're a man. You may not be seen as crazy, but you may be seen as, stupid or weak or difficult. Mm-hmm. How many men think that? Mark and me. Okay, good. And this gentleman here. I think there's an interesting thing here. I think there's an interesting question here, which is men, I think, are afraid to say, actually, by the way, it's not easy being angry if you're a man either. Yeah. That part of this is the dial has moved on what's acceptable anger in any conversation, and certainly in any workplace conversation. We'll do that another time. Lisa.
Hello, I would just like to say that I found menopause immensely helpful. I have spent most of my young life, all of my life, being under 5 foot tall. Yes. And very smiley. I have the complete opposite to resting bitch face. I have people telling me how happy I am.
Chanting in face.
All the time. And the thing that I've loved about menopause is that I can be really and I'm not going to swear, which I would normally do. I can be really incredibly angry, and I love it.
Yes.
Because I can also be angry more calmly.
Yes.
And in a way that I tell people that I am angry, I tell them, I just say, it's just much easier to express my feelings in a way and put them over in a way that is quite effective. And I'm really enjoying the fact that people find me a bit scary now, because it's great after, you know, having been called cute.
Yes.
But
I have to say, you do still look quite cute. But I'm also respecting your anger.
Nice.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm finding the menopause incredibly exciting. So, like, when it started, I was just, well, I thought it was Brexit because I was just angry all the time. And then I realised it probably wasn't Brexit. And what I realised is, from having done drugs in my early years in the 90s, from having taken ecstasy, I found that there's a huge similarity between the menopause and coming down off an E. So when you are a young woman and you're bathed in estrogen is the lovey-dovey drug. Like, kind of, it's just the thing that makes you just love babies and listen to people's bullshit problems with a smile on your face and kind of like hug people and care for people and want to nurture and like make things lovely. And once the estrogen starts draining out of your body in menopause, suddenly you do just feel like you're coming down off a pill. And you're like, what did I do while I was high? Like, did I just deal with loads of bullshit uncomplainingly for 30 years? Like, have I been a fool? Like, kind of, what's going on? And then you get HRT and then you become high again. So I would massively recommend it. It's definitely kept me going. But it's a fascinating process to go through menopause, because you really, you know, as you lose skin elasticity, you also lose the amount of fucks you give. And I think the one thing that I wish that men could live as women for one day, like, kind of, but I think the thing that men would be most surprised about if they were women for a day is just how much we care about what other people think, like how conscious we are of what's happening in every room, this hypervigilance. Am I offending someone? Have I been nice enough to that person? Have I made that person sad? Have I ignored that person? Is someone thinking badly of me? This constant hypervigilance of being a woman in any room, constantly thinking about what people are thinking at that time. And the menopause takes about half of that out. You are more focused in yourself at that time. And yeah, it's a very exciting phase. I'm fully embracing my hagdom.
What do you think? One of the things I wondered about is in the book, it's really funny, but it's also really sad realizing that you're dealing with just a lot more very difficult stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
Kids, friends, divorces, deaths, people, loss.
Yeah.
And does it make you think differently about the balance of things in your life? Because the truth is, Caitlin, is that, I mean, without tiptoeing around it, you also become a superstar, right? So you become this big thing where there's endless projects. Everyone says, oh, let's go and write this film or do this thing. So do you think, oh God, work is sillier, writing is sillier, these conversations are more important? Has it changed the way you think about any of that?
No, because I just love my work, and it's how I work things out is by writing them. And again, I'm really concentrated on doing useful stuff. So every single thing is a problem that I have seen and want to solve. Like, even if, like, the movie that I made last year, How to Build a Girl, I wanted to make a teenage coming of age movie, but I wanted to make it about, first of all, a girl who was fat, but that wasn't an issue. That wasn't her personality. It wasn't like Rebel Wilson in Pitch Perfect. She's just fat and we don't mention it, and she's beautiful and brilliant and gorgeous. Secondly, she was lonely. She has no friends. Most coming of age movies are about having your gal gang around you and the importance of your best friend. And that's great, but a lot of people don't have friends when they're teenagers. I didn't. So I wanted to make it about a girl who's alone. I wanted to make it about being working class and earning money, because most films and most TV shows, the plots aren't about making your money. And that's what we spend most of our time doing. How am I going to pay my rent? Like, how am I going to get my nut? Like, how am I going to do this? And I wanted to make it a coming of age film where you see the boy at the beginning and at the end, they're not going out with each other, because we always presume in any movie where there's a girl and a boy in the first 10 minutes, they have to get together and that's the happy ending. And they don't. They are friends at the end of it. And, you know, and he says, you are too young, it would be inappropriate, we are going to be friends, but in a really funny and sexy way.
Can I say just one body thing? I'm gonna bring in a moment, if I might, Jessica Baxter and Julie Guy McLean, who've both got things, but you talk about someone who's just fat and beautiful and happy.
Yeah.
Right? And in the book, there's a lovely moment where it's like, I can't remember, it's 10, 11 in the morning. So in one moment, you're in front of the mirror, you're like, hey, this is working. And I wonder, given how much kind of the sort of magazine world there is about how you look,
Yes.
and how much kind of celebrity guff there is about all that stuff, why you think it is you're happy and fine and lots of people aren't?
This is the question I probably get asked the most is, do you really like yourself? Like, are you really happy with yourself? From women
physically or
physically, yeah, just kind of like women just going, how do you get to like yourself? Like, kind of the column that I've not yet had the balls to write for the Times is one where I just go on about how I think I'm hot. not in a boasty way, but just in a kind of like, because I can't think of a woman that I've seen who's gone, I think I'm great. Like kind of the most beautiful women in the world would go, oh yeah, my elbows are really dry, or I've got a really weird toe, or like kind of, well, you should see me in the morning. Like it's part of the job of being a woman to hate yourself a deliciously sexy amount. You've always got to be apologizing for yourself and being, I'm so aware of my flaws, like kind of, and I hate that for us.
Yeah.
And the reason I hate it for us is because it's when you have teenage daughters yourself or teenagers yourself, and you go, oh my God, am I going to have to teach you to hate yourself 20% and to always put yourself down and to always be aware of your flaws? And you just go, no, I am not going to do that. I'm going to do the work on myself to make sure that I can just stand in front of you and go, I really think I'm great. Like kind of, as a
did that
gift
happen,
to you,
Caitlin?
as a gift to any woman to go, you can look like this and really like it.
But did that happen, or has that always been the case?
No, when did it happen? It was after I gave birth to my first daughter, and it has been a journey, because my biggest plan when I was 15, and just thought of myself as incredibly fat and ugly, my big plan, my only plan, was that I would be somehow involved in a horrific car crash where most of my body was smashed off, and then the NHS would rebuild me much thinner and really hot. That was my big plan. Like, that was it. Like, there was nothing else. That's how much I hated myself. And then when I nearly died during the birth of my first daughter, and when I finally came round, I just looked at my body and just sort of went, bloody hell, like, well done, mate. Like, you got through that. Like, hello, legs. Like, thank God you're still there. I thought you were going to fall off halfway through it. And just sort of went slowly. And it only lasted for I felt it for 30 seconds. Just, hey, you're great. And I was just like, okay, that's a feeling I've never felt before. I need to work on that. I'm going to keep going on that until I can totally feel that about my whole body. And I have, and I think it's a really important, one of the reasons why I want to write the column is because, and just to say to women, this is an important job you have to do. Like, you have, when people go, you've got to love yourself, like, you've got to love your bum. You've got to love your toes. Like, you've got to love your nose. Like, you've got to do that work, because you will be dead so soon. Like, I'm 46 now, I can see death coming down the tunnel. And the idea that I would be on my deathbed and just to think that I'd always been at war with my fucking legs is just insane to me. Like,
Kenny, I'm gonna bring in Julie, if I might, because she wants to talk about the Women's Union, and I want to get back to this point that you made, Hannah, about generational differences that Jessica Baxter made. So, Julie, are you there? I'm hoping. This is Julie Guy McLean.
I like whoever it is in the middle with the red
There
curtains.
you are.
They look like it's the Muppet Show, and it's going to open in a minute. And we're going to see Kermit. I like
Hang on,
that.
she's there. She's all there. Julie Guy McLean, hello to you.
Hello. Firstly, I absolutely loved your book. It was the first time I recommended it to my stepdad, and I've been able to have a conversation with him about feminism, which I've never been able to have before. So thank you so much. He loved it too. I just wanted you to talk a bit more about the Women's Union. I think it's the best idea I've ever heard, and how do we make it happen?
Oh, thank you. Oh my God, I love everything about being a writer, but one of the things I've been most jealous about with another writer's career is Douglas Adams in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because in that, he just describes things that would be cool, and then because lots of nerds read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, they then went on and made them. So like, he basically, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is the iPhone. He goes, it's an electronic device, it's in your pocket, it tells you everything you want to know. Translation devices, the Babelfish, he just puts it all there. That's what sci-fi is. And so much of writing is wishing, making a wish, I think. My favorite writing is anyway. So I was like, I want in on that. I'm gonna just write things that I want to happen. I don't have time to make them happen, but like, hopefully just one clever or organized or rich woman, basically I want J.K. Rowling to read this chapter and go, I will now fund and make this happen. So with the Women's Union, one of the problems that I observe now from having sort of been on the feminist barricades for the last 10 years is that so much of feminism is lone individual women going online and doing their activism for free. And obviously that's deleterious in several ways. One, it favors white middle-class women because they have the time to do that. So you immediately become much more intersectional. And secondly, it means you're more vulnerable, because it's just you there. So if you've made a mistake, people can take you down, and then suddenly the cause crashes again, because we've seen time and time again, a feminist hero comes along, makes one mistake, and then they're done, and then that campaign is fucked, and then we have to try and find another one. So we need collective action. And so a women's union would mean that the members would pay dues, and the people who work for the women's union would then be paid to do their activism. They'd be part of a collective. You would be non-partisan, affiliated to no party, but in the same way that we used to talk about the Mumsnet vote, you to Mumsnet, that's a huge voting block there. The Women's Union is a huge voting block, and the Women's Union would scrutinise every manifesto and every piece of legislation and be able to say to its members, this party is better for women than this party, or none of these parties are doing anything, or here is some research that we have done and legislation that we suggest, and make offers, and just finally properly represent women, have paid voices, experts, research, ideas being pumped through into Parliament and suggesting this is the things that women need. Because if we're waiting on an ad hoc basis for basically whatever Stella Creasy or Jess Phillips can do for women, you know, or Harriet Harman, like kind of like 3 women, like we need a proper collective bloc.
This is, but Caitlin, I mean, not to, it's lovely to write it as something that you wish for, but that's a doable thing,
yeah,
isn't it? So
I've even worked out the branding and everything.
Okay, come on.
How you would afford the dues, because I'm very conscious of like kind of, you know, people being able to afford this, is you work out how much you spend on takeaway tea or coffee every week. That's what you give as your union dues, and you are sent by the Women's Union a beautiful Women's Union flask and fair trade tea and coffee, and the deal is that you make your tea and coffee at home, you take it with you, and the money that you would have spent on your takeaways, that's what you give to the Women's Union, so it's pegged to whatever sort of income level you have.
And is there, I mean, sort of JK Rowling aside, I've got the, I'm all in.
He's like all over this.
I'm all in, but that is the way, but to the point that we said earlier about, you know, how do you take IUDs or how do you take public transport for safety at night?
Yes.
That's the way you make that happen. That's the way that goes from an argument to a
yes.
thing.
If I could do one thing, if I had, I mean, you know, sadly I am just a flippity-gibber dilettante writer, so I don't have time to do this. But I think the one thing that would, whenever we say how can we make this campaign work or this campaign work, like kind of how do we prioritise them? How do we bring about the change that we want to see in the way we did with IUDs? A women's union solves all those problems because they can be doing 20 campaigns and they're being paid for it, and they are there 24 hours a day professionally representing women and thinking about this stuff all the time. Because at the moment, the brilliant thing about feminism up until this point is it's been a completely amateur, crowdsourced thing that women across the world have just done because they want to affect these changes and they have these ideas. But that's the bad thing about it now. We need to go to the next step and actually properly have an organisation that represents and looks after us. Because at the moment, if we're relying on a system that we have now, which is just down to a couple of women to go on Twitter and spend, you know, 5 months of their life being abused and hoping that someone will listen and they get enough likes in order for this to happen. It's a shamingly amateurish way for women to be represented in the 21st century, and it holds us all back. You know, we need to have that proper organisation helping us.
So, well, I can see Julie smiling at that, and there are quite a lot of people, not least Katie Vanek-Smith, my co-founder, saying, oh yeah, James, I might leave you to do this. Come on.
I will help for like at least 6 weeks before I go off to do something else.
Okay,
great. I will be as helpful as possible.
Totally excited for that period of time. All right, I just want to get one last voice in, which is Jessica Baxter, who made a point that was to yours, Hannah, and I suppose it speaks a little bit to one of the subjects that often comes up in our newsroom, which is generational. Jessica, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you very well. Far away.
We've got the same hair. Oh my God, you're literally me. Like 20, 30 years ago, I'm trying to guess. You look like you're 12.
Switch the numbers around, 21.
That's 12.
So, yeah, so a little bit context. I'm in a feminist group at university, and we do like discussions, campaigns, events, and I think sometimes it's beneficial to be a younger feminist because even when I was in school, I started hearing feminist narratives. The internet is a bit of a minefield, but it can be really informative. But there's also an advantage to having some life experience, like you were talking about, assuming that everyone was having a bad day and kind of being knowledgeable. I think it was Liz that said more life equals more trauma, and I'm 21 and I agree with that already. So I just wanted to know for our members or any kind of young feminists, what would you tell us? What's your piece of advice? What's kind of the best thing that your life experience has given you about feminism?
Oh, that's a fucking great question.
Thank you.
No, and it's fucking great hair and you're fucking great. One of the things that breaks my heart the most about feminism at the moment is there is a massive generational divide, and so much of that has been fueled, I think, and very often encouraged by social media. And so we see, you know, when we were talking about call-out culture earlier, there is definitely a divide between modern feminists now and older feminists on a variety of issues. And that breaks my heart because while we are arguing about stuff, the patriarchy is just sitting there stroking its penis going, carry on, this is great. It's business as usual for me. I can just carry on. And we have to find a way. And I think the key is going to be we've got to get off social media. That's the medium is the problem. in these respects. Nothing has ever been, no one ever went, I'm so glad that went onto Twitter, that made it better. Like, kind of like, it was all a bit of a shit pit, but then people started discussing it on Twitter and then everything calmed down. We're never going to say that sentence. And if there was one, an initiative that I would love to do is just if younger feminists could adopt an older feminist for a week and vice versa, and just spend a bit of time getting to know each other and talking about it, because the younger feminists have incredible new ideas. Like, you are far better on intersectionality. You are absolutely understanding the kind of challenges and the way that we need to change the world. You are a factory of these incredible ideas, and you have that passion and fervor and energy. But the older feminists know how to get things done. They have run campaigns. They know how to make alliances. They know how you can push through into legislation. They'll know how to help you when you start being trolled and bullied and hurt. And at the moment, the fact that there seems to be this massive split in many sections of feminism between the older generations, that's heartbreaking. That's where we're going to stall. Because we have to do this together. We cannot do this apart. We cannot be fighting each other. We need to unite and face the common enemy, which is just general bullshit. That's like kind of, I can be more specific about what the common enemy is, but it's generally under the category of bullshit.
Caitlin, what's your next book about?
Men. Men. So I'm going to do... so there's How to Be a Woman, then More Than a Woman. I'll be doing one of those every 10 years, because I just like the idea of checking in every 10 years and seeing kind of like, what each sort of decade of being a woman brings about. But the next book I want to do is men. It's called What About the Men, because that is the question I get asked repeatedly. And for the first 5 or 6 years, I was like, I don't care. Like, I'm team tits. Like, I'm a feminist. Like, I'm with the women. I can't do the men. Like, it would be the ultimate irony of feminism if women solved all the problems of women and then had to solve the problems of men. That's not what we were trying to do. But as I am older and wiser, I think men do have massive problems. Huge problems, and a lot of them impact on women, because what women have is this incredible informal amateur network, feminism, where whatever problem you have as a woman, you can go online and someone else will have experienced that problem and talked about it and come up with names for it and come up with solutions for it. And if you look at the difference between men and women's fates over the last 120 years, women's lives have improved exponentially. 120 years ago, we weren't even seen as proper human beings. We couldn't own property. It was legal to rape us. You could consign us to a mental asylum on the say-so of our husbands. We couldn't have jobs. And now we're in space and we wear trousers and we can talk about sex and we're Fleabag. Men's lives in the last 120 years are almost exactly the same, except they don't wear top hats anymore. And when I talk to younger men, they are going, it's easier to be a woman. And women are going, no, it's not. But in many ways, it is easier to be a young woman than a young man, because we have feminist organizations at school. We've got Beyonce singing songs about us. Like, we're talking about how we can help each other. Men don't have that kind of network at all. These conversations aren't happening. And so I want to write a book that just goes, I'm going to tell you some stuff that women have learned for talking about their problems, because what we're always talking about in feminism is problems of gender. The idea that this is what men are supposed to be and this is what women are supposed to be. And women have spent the last 120 years going, I don't agree with this definition of being a woman. I want to do anything I want. Men have not really challenged that. Men are still left with exactly what they had 120 years earlier. We have not swapped equally. We've taken all the man things. We've got trousers. We're ruling countries. You have not taken being able to talk about your emotions or being able to, be a proper full-time parent. And so let's swap all this stuff. Let's just get to the point where finally we're just all human beings together on this earth, trying to have as much joy as possible before we die, because that's all there is in the end. You've just got to try and wade through the bullshit and try and have as much joy as you can until you die.
Ladies and gentlemen, Caitlin Moran. One other way of course, getting some joy is actually reading the book if you haven't. Caitlin, very kindly, have you agreed, by the way, to sign a book?
Yes, come on.
Okay, go on.
Yeah.
So Caitlin will sign some books outside. If you're joining online and you'd like to get a book signed, just message me here in the chat and I'll make sure we get a book signed for you as well. But thank you. It's lovely to have everyone in the newsroom today.
Thank you so much.
It's great to see you. Thanks so much.